Welcome. I am joined by Pox Populi, and this is a long overdue discussion on Christianity. I think we may have broached this topic last year, but now we're going to go through it, and I'm looking forward to it. So, Pox, you're very welcome. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thanks for inviting me on for this chat. It's been a while, but as always, it's good to catch up with you.
Yeah. Well, people often contact me and say, when are you going to do a podcast with Pox Populi? So, people are interested in what you have to say, and I'm sure they'll be interested in what you have to say about this. So let's start off. You come from a Christian background. I come from a Christian background. And it's possible that I won't say we're on the same wavelength exactly, but I think we're more or less, we're there or thereabouts. We have similar opinions anyway. So what is your impression of Christianity in the current age?
Well, that's a very important qualifier there at the end, in the current age, because one of the weeds that you find yourself in whenever this subject comes up is that people will bring up Christianity's glorious past, and they'll even bring up Christianity's martial past. So I'm referring to crusades or colonial endeavors, which get associated with Christianity. But if you look at it in the current age, I find it hard to take any position other than that Christianity is corrosive. It is eating away at us. It is paving the way to our demise. And when I say us and our, I am referring to European peoples. And so I have spent a long time thinking about this, wrestling with this. You mentioned that we've broached this subject on a few occasions, but we've never really got into it. And this is interesting because I think about this a lot. I think this is one of the most important topics, but I don't bring it up that often, actually, because it is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And every time I post about Christianity or write about it, I end up losing, 20 or so followers, or and even longtime followers. They'll see me criticizing Christianity, and that's it. They leave, they block me, whatever. And I also understand that we don't need division in the ranks at this time. So I don't bring this topic up very often, but I do find it very important. And so, I would say that that's my position on Christianity now in this current year, in current age. And I've said, probably in our conversations, and I've said it in other conversations, that the CQ, the Christian question, was for me the most difficult red pill to swallow, even more difficult than World War II stuff, race and IQ. I mean, everything that you associate with taking the red pill. For me, if you had told me that 10 or so years ago you would get involved in nationalist politics and ideas, and you'd walk the path paved by great minds before you and uncover all these hidden truths. You take all these red pills, and that would lead you to seeing Christianity in a completely different and rather negative light. And then you would also be directed towards your pre-Christian ancestral customs and traditions and faiths. I would have thought you were talking bollocks. I would have been like, what does that have to do with nationalism? I just want to stop the NGO boats from dumping Africans in my country. So it's been a long road to how I got here, and I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, it's much easier to criticize foreign ideas and foreign religions and overlook, your own turf. And Christianity is a difficult one because, for a lot of us, our parents or our grandparents, great-great-grandparents were, firm believers, and they went to mass and all the rest, and whatever. I think let them do what they want to do. But as you said, it's now you're starting to notice how corrosive it is. And later on, I'm going to quote the last 3 tweets from Pope Francis, or whoever is looking after his Twitter account. And I disagree with every single thing he says. I disagree with it's the opposite of what I believe in.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just from the outset, this is not going to be a popular podcast. I'm aware of that. And anytime I have criticized Catholicism or Christianity in general, the same as what happened to Pox, you will lose subscribers, whatever. It's a very touchy subject. And I think in the last, let's say, when I started off streaming and all the rest, I didn't really tackle this because I didn't want to offend, good people, because a lot of Christians are good people. But there comes a time when you feel that you have to call out mind poison. And that's what I think it is as things stand. So I sent you in Skype, I sent you a pre-Christian virtue list. And okay, I think some of it is an exaggeration, but we might go through them, Pox, and get your take on them. So I'll just open up the file.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know that that meme, but I don't know if I'm able to exit the call to look at it.
Yeah, don't worry, I have it here. Right. So what I'll do is I'll list the pre-Christian virtue, and then I'll list the Christian virtue. And if you want to say anything, Pox, just jump in, and then I'll go on to the next one. So the first one is pre-Christian virtues: dominance. Christian virtues: submission.
See, again, this is something that the Christians will get their hackles up about, and they'll say, well, how do you explain the Crusades, and how do you explain the Battle of Poitiers? How do you explain the defense of Vienna? That was all Christian, strong based, muscular, martial Christianity. But this is the problem with Christianity, is that it is a highly adaptive, highly malleable faith and ideology, and also highly contradictory and internally contradictory. And so I often say that those martial, muscular exploits were done in spite of Christianity, oftentimes, not because of it, because the teachings of Christ. Now, if you were talking about the Old Testament, we might have a different conversation here, but the teachings of Christ, from where we get Christianity, would not have been conducive to something like the Crusades or any of the other, violent exploits of European Christians. I think that it's the Europeanness that was the driving force behind, the Faustian colonization of the globe, the conquering of so many other peoples, the conquests, the Crusades. That, and also it was a product of its time. The world was more warlike 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, and now we come to today. And I just think it is something that Christians do have to reconcile with. That yes, Christianity, the teachings of Christ, do bend towards being submissive, turning their cheek. The victory is God's, so you don't really have to fight. Just wait it out, basically, or love your enemies, give up everything for Christ. You're even compelled by Christ to turn on your mother, father, brother, and sister if that's necessary in order to follow him. So, yeah, I mean, it's one that the Christians will object to, but I would say it's a fairly accurate categorization.
Okay, the next one is pre-Christian virtues: courage, Christian virtues, fear.
Again, see, I'm not so sure that this is fair, because you do have Christians who have faced fearsome situations, fearsome circumstances, fearsome enemies. Obviously, Christians have faced martyrdom. They have died for their beliefs. They often wanted to. They sought that out. Early Christianity was full of crazy people. The early cult of Christ was mental. And when people say that it's a death cult, when people use the word death cult, they really need to pause and let those two words sink in. What is a death cult? Well, it's not that they want to kill people or kill themselves. It's that they revere death. They revere the death of Christ. They revere the self-sacrifice. They seek to emulate it. So you have early Christians who, they were. We'll get into this later, I'm sure, but I suppose I'll mention it now. Early Christians were punished by Rome, the Roman authorities, even though Rome was very lenient towards not only Christianity, but other cults. And when I say cult, I don't mean in this modern sense. When you think of the word cult, you think of, something evil, dangerous, people gathering underground somewhere, dressing up in black and, doing weird stuff. Cult in the historic sense just meant like a school of religion, a school of thought. And they would gather and practice their ideas, their faiths. And Rome was very tolerant of many different so-called cults, including the Christ cult, until the Christians started subverting everything about Roman society, everything about Roman religion, everything about Roman customs, subverting the reverence of ancestors, until they started vandalizing statues and temples. And so then the Romans punished the Christians. It's the Christians will tell you all about how much they were punished, but they'll never tell you why. And where have we heard that before? And so what you see in a lot of early Christians is a desire to be martyred. In any case, though, that takes courage. I don't think that's indicative of an ideology of fear. That said, there is an element of fear in that you are essentially following Yahweh or Christ, who, let's be honest, is supposed to be the Son and also the Son of and also Yahweh himself. This is another problem that Christians run into. The God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, the God of today, and Jesus Christ. Who are they? Because the God of the Old Testament is very different, isn't he? And Christ is meant to be one and the same with that God. So you see in the Old Testament, and then you see the same teaching continues through the ages. You have to obey Yahweh or he will kill you. And you have to obey Yahweh or he will punish you with eternal torture. And so there definitely is an element of fear. In fact, you are commanded to fear the Lord thy God. And I've seen Christians say that interpretation of fear means like, it's like veneration, it's like respect. Well, okay, but I think you can respect that, you can say that, sure. But when this God punishes you with eternal torture or death, or punishes not only you but all your kin with genocide, I think the word fear is appropriate. And yeah, I mean, I've had it said to me on many occasions every time I criticize Christianity. that it doesn't matter if Christianity is wrong on this, or not, or contradictory here or there. It's about your soul. You're going to hell. So again, the implication is you better think like us and do as we say, or as our God says, otherwise you're going to eternal damnation. So definitely fear plays a role in that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, some of these comparisons are fairly loose, and then others, I think, around the money. So speaking of money, pre-Christian virtues, wealth; Christian virtues, poverty. Now, before I get boxed in on this one, I actually was thinking before I came on, and I found the part of the Bible anyway. This is the King James Version, but it says, Matthew 19:23-26. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, Verily I say unto you, that a rich man shall hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And I remember hearing about that in national school, primary school, and in my infantile brain, I was thinking, all the rich people that I know, and I didn't know many, but I was thinking, the rich swanning around, they're screwed, but poor people like me, we're saved because we're not rich. So, Pox, what do you make of this?
Yeah, so this is probably a more fair criticism and comparison. I mean, there's a reason why Spengler is said to have, he's quoted as having said that Christianity is the grandmother of Bolshevism. And, this conversation we're having about Christianity, it's a conversation that goes back thousands of years. I've already mentioned the early Romans, the early Christians living in the Roman Empire. The Romans had criticisms. The Romans were dubious of this Christ cult. And then throughout the centuries, we see this crop up again and again. Nietzsche obviously was a critic of Christianity. The 1930s Germans and Italians had their criticisms of Christianity, and the criticisms are almost always the same. There's this set of criticisms, and one of them is that Christianity is this sort of proto-communist ideology, and Nietzsche, in particular, pointed out that Christianity was this ideology of resentment. It was an ideology of the Untermensch, the lesser man. And if you look at the history of early Christianity, who were the majority, the vast majority of early Christians? Slaves, Jews, marginalized people. We would call them, liberals today would call them the marginalized people of Roman society. And they were resentful about the power that Romans had over them. They were resentful towards the gens, towards the aristocratic class. And Christ is considered, depending on the person you talk to, the Christian you talk to, Christ will be celebrated as, in a positive way, as this revolutionary sort of rock star who changed the world. How did he change the world? In what way was he revolutionary exactly? Well, because at a time in which you were basically stuck in your caste, you were basically, beholden to your station in society. He came along and preached that you lowly people who cannot improve your lot in life, there was no upward mobility really. You have all these blessings in store for you in the next life if you just follow me. And all these Roman bastards who are oppressing you, all these rich people who are oppressing you, who take from you, they'll get their just desserts. Don't you worry. Now, of course, Jesus also said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's." But again, there's lots of internal contradictions in the Bible and in the Christ story, which kind of betrays the notion that it's the infallible Word of God. But yes, this notion of poverty is a good thing. Suffering is a good thing. That definitely is central to Christianity. That is a fair criticism. And why is it a criticism? Well, because it's not good to live as a weak person. It's not good to have the mentality that if you're in a bad situation, if you're suffering, if you're being exploited, victimized, mistreated, that you should just take it. That it's just a temporary earthly test, and if you pass it with proper Christian suffering with dignity, you will be rewarded in a second life. That, I think, is one of the corrosive notions that our people are suffering from today, and it definitely has roots in Christianity. So I think that's definitely a fair comparison. And now, if you look at pre-Christian notions, so obviously you can say that this same mindset exists in various pre-Christian philosophies. The Greco-Roman Stoics have a similar mentality, and you could even say that Christianity, which was very Hellenized at some point, it became very Hellenized, that Christianity borrows from Stoicism, that the Christ figure represents a Stoic figure as well. You had people like Diogenes, who lived in a barrel, right? He didn't have clothes, I don't think. He didn't shower. He didn't have any earthly possessions. So you have that in other pre-Christian schools of thought, of philosophies and whatnot. But on the whole, that's not where general pre-Christian European society was going. These were kind of outsiders doing their own thing, kind of like Buddhist monks in Tibet, just living their own way, taking vows of silence or being vegans and not harming a living thing, and just spending all day meditating. But the rest of society is going to work and doing stuff and watching television and eating meat. So for the rest of pre-Christian society, you have more of an attitude of if someone strikes you, you strike them back. If someone wrongs you, you set things right. If someone attacks you, you defend yourself. If you want something, you go trying to get it. If you have wealth, you pass it down to your children, and you create a legacy, create a dynasty. And this is another thing that Christians have to contend with, because hold on one second, just want to make sure I get my thoughts right here. Going back to how Christ is considered this revolutionary figure who changed the world, another thing that he preached that was so radical was love your enemies, turn the cheek. If someone strikes you on the cheek, give them the other cheek. If someone asks you for your shirt, give them your shirt and your coat. So again, like, Christians will kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth. They'll say, no, Christianity isn't a doctrine of weakness or submission or poverty or servitude or resentment, etc., etc. But then there's all these notions that they big up, that they praise as being so revolutionary and radical. And it's like, you can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it. And it was radical. It was revolutionary for this guru, this rabbi, this spiritual leader to, in his time especially, to go around preaching forgiveness and peace, and don't hold grudges, and don't take an eye for an eye because you'll make the whole world blind, because that's what the world generally was like. So, I mean, you kind of have to accept that. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it is correct to forgive. Sometimes it is correct to just let things go and not react violently. But that is kind of the basis of Christ's teaching, was forgive, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. So I think that's a fair criticism.
You're dealing with a very complex system here, and it really does a number on the plebs, like that you can convince them that the rich man is going to damnation. So, he kind of has carte blanche. He can do what he wants, because in the end he's screwed. But because you live in poverty, and your poverty might in some way be connected to that rich man, you're going to go to your eternal reward. And I find it really, really fascinating, this idea that you can convince people living in abject poverty that they're in a better position than the rich man. It's just really
as
crazy.
As an Irishman, I'm sure you understand this very well, that one of the criticisms you could have of Christianity, looking at it through an Irish eye, is that Christianity comes to Ireland long ago. It replaces all of the Irish folklore. It replaces the Irish gods. It replaces the Irish myths. Early Christians do a relatively good job of preserving some of it, but usually it's preserved through the Christian perspective, which is kind of dubious, and obviously it's skewed in a certain perspective, and then the rest of it is all lost. And then this Christian idealization of suffering, of poverty, becomes rather exaggerated during the rest of Ireland's history. And you have Irish people who were living in really horrible circumstances, just sort of taking it because that's the Christ-like thing to do. Just as Christ suffered the burden of the cross and the torture and the crucifixion, so too we must suffer all of the insult and injury that the Irish suffered over the centuries. And then also, the replacement of the Irish ethno-faith and folklore with something that came from elsewhere, I think played a role in so many Irish leaving Ireland, because they no longer had a connection to their soil, to their blood and soil. And so for them, it was easy to just leave the country, leave their ancestral land, because their eyes were on an afterlife, their eyes were on heaven. You know what I mean? So, I think this particular part of Christianity definitely has had a stranglehold in Ireland, I would say, for quite some time.
Yeah. If you were a rich man, Pox, you would probably love Christianity in the fact that it would more or less disarm the poor people around you,
mm-hmm.
and stop them from stealing your riches. I think you would be very much on the side of the church, and I think you would be a very benevolent donor to the church, because it would keep the people in line.
Well, this is another one of the contradictions in Christianity, is that the clergy, the churchmen, especially as you go higher up the ecclesiastical hierarchy, are incredibly wealthy. I mean, look at the story of Robin Hood. Who does Robin Hood actually rob from? He robs the rich to feed the poor. He doesn't actually rob the rich, though. He doesn't really rob barons and nobles and knights. Oftentimes, he spares them. Who does he rob more often, more than anyone else? He robs corrupt churchmen. He robs rich bishops, priests, because they were the ones getting all this money for nothing. They were the ones preaching to the poor peasants. You gotta give your tithing, you know. You gotta tithe, you gotta give to the church. Otherwise you won't get any blessings. You know, you won't be, if you don't give to the church, what kind of afterlife are you gonna have? You better give. And you know, this is just the long history of Christianity is laden with this, absolutely laden with this. I mean, you have that period in medieval Catholicism where they had the indulgences, where you could just pay for your sins. You know, you could obtain forgiveness for your sins through a super chat. You know, so again, it's one of those contradictions. It's one of those hypocrisies that really does leave a bad taste in the mouth, and put the Christian religion in a rather negative light.
Yeah, if such a belief system more or less frees up the rich man to do what he wants, you know, I think there's a similar system at play in this period, whereby Jews who control so much, they control the media, banking, etc. And yet we are supposed to feel sorry for them. We the poor people are supposed to feel sorry for these billionaires because they are the descendants of Holocaust survivors. So, you know, there is, I can see that Jewish stamp all over Christianity.
Oh, I mean,
whole guilt system, having to atone, like the German people, you know, generations after the Nazis,
original sin.
They still have to atone for the sins, you know. And you know, in Christianity, you have original sin. So there's this thing of you can never really balance the books. You're always trying to balance it, you know.
And what could possibly be more Jewish than giving money in order to get blessings in the afterlife? What could be more Jewish than paying, than dropping some coins in a box to wash away your sins? That's a very Jewish, you know. I think that's just, we'll just you know, drop some coins, we'll pay this away. Yeah, it's basically like a bribe, you know. Very, very Jewish.
Yeah, and obviously it was a massive success. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I got to visit the Vatican, and I remember walking around. Outside, you've got all those souvenir stands, and then when you get inside, you've got lots of security. These Swiss Army Guard?
Yeah, the Swiss Guard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember reading up afterwards that, you know, these are some of the best trained, whatever, soldiers or whatever you call them in the world. Like they're some of the best trained, and I was thinking, this doesn't seem to go hand in hand with turn the other cheek, and you know, what are they protecting in there? What are these Swiss guys?
Well, I mean,
you know, are they
the
protecting
whole Vatican
souls?
in and of itself doesn't seem to go well with Christian teaching. I mean, it's so opulent, it's so beautiful, it's so rich. I mean, there's so much wealth and power in that place, and you think, is this what Jesus Christ preached? Is this where he would live if he were around now? Would he live in these palatial buildings and have these massive churches erected? I don't know, but again, I think that's the European spirit shining through, and Europeans like to build beautiful things, and they like to have. In the pre-Christian world, of course you would build beautiful temples to your gods. Of course you would build beautiful monuments, beautiful statues to your gods. Of course you would. That's Greco-Roman, Persian, things like that. If you go to the Germanic peoples, of course you would have the sacred grove, beautiful nature. So these ornate cathedrals, these gilded halls, and the art, I think, no, it's not very Christian, but it is highly European. But again, this tension, this conflict between the European spirit and the Christian veneer over it has characterized our existence for over 1,000 years.
Yeah, a lot of people say, if there were a second coming, the Vatican Church would very quickly snuff it out, because it would, the idea is it would undermine everything that they're up to, all the material wealth that they are garnering. There is another thing I wanted to say, Pox, before I move on to the next virtue. And it's in line with this whole thing about poverty being a virtue through Christian eyes. We see now every day boatloads of extremely poor people from Africa and Asia coming into Europe. Some of them are coming on boats, some of them are walking through various countries. And I think the reason, one of the reasons why this has been allowed to go on for the last few decades is because if you're a Christian and you adore the idea of poor people, and poor people, generally are better than rich people, and you've got billions of poor people in the world, I think at the back of your mind, you must be thinking that if you're living in the first world will be made better by bringing in the third world. So you're replacing what would seem rich with something that is poor. Do you think there's something going on there, like these NGOs and all these young students as well who are supporting their own ruination, to be honest? But do you think that Christianity ties into this whole NGO and people trafficking, etc.?
Absolutely, and the Christians don't like to hear it because, if it's not focused entirely on Jewish NGOs, Israeli NGOs, then they start to really get their knickers in a twist. But the Christian organizations, the Christian churches, Christian NGOs, the Catholic Church, are up to their eyeballs in immigration. And it's got to the point where, I pulled up some facts here, some quotes, some headlines, some news articles. So this came out of 2023, December 2023. The Catholic Church is becoming our Soros. Growing scandal around Italian Catholic Church funding illegal immigration. Pro-refugee activists brag about not having to work due to church donations. Italian bishops are accused of financing the illegal transport of African immigrants to Europe. Here is Pope Francis in April of 2023. Pope Francis urges Hungarians to open doors to migrants. He didn't even say refugees, he just said migrants. So they've stopped the charade there. They're just saying, take in migrants, take in just anyone who wants to come to your country. They don't even have to be so-called refugees, just anyone. Then we have in the United States, for example, with regards to Somali immigration and other immigrants from other places in Central Africa, like the Congo. So here's some facts here. In 1980, there were 640 Somalis in the whole of the United States. Now there are at minimum 6,000 in the state of Maine alone. The editor of Refugee Resettlement Watch explains the process by which refugees are resettled in America, saying, quote, "The U.S. State Department brings in the refugees that the UN has largely chosen for us, and Homeland Security are supposed to screen them. Then the refugees are divided up between 9 major contractors that include groups such as the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, World Lutheran Service, and Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society." That's the infamous HIAS. This continues in 2019. Portland, Maine was overrun with hundreds of migrants from Central Africa. All of them had traveled along the underground railroad of migrant safe houses that extends from Central America through Mexico and into the United States. Once they arrived in America, Catholic Charities Maine assisted in sending hundreds of Angolans and Congolese migrants from San Antonio to Portland. This isn't Portland, Oregon, this is Portland, Maine. So it's like the complete other, well, both Portlands would be very much north of San Antonio, Texas, but this is basically, they transport the migrants from the deep south all the way up to the upper reaches of the Northeast. So from San Antonio to Portland, paying for their bus fare and providing specific instructions on what to do and where to go to claim benefits. I could also cite examples from Germany of the League of Protestant Churches. They have their own ship. They have their own NGO boat that they bought and paid for, and that they use to ferry Africans into Germany. And this is the Protestant congregation of churches. So it's neither a Protestant thing or a Catholic thing. It's both. I just read there that even the Lutherans are mentioned. And then, of course, they work with Jewish charities, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and amongst others. So, yeah, the Christian organizations are all up in this. Now, the young people, the oftentimes females who are, seen on videos dancing with these Africans or on the boats with them in their stupid little orange vests or whatever. Are they Christians? Probably not, but they are liberals. They are liberal progressives. And in my opinion, there is an undeniable line from Christianity to liberal progressivism, just as Spengler said that there is a line from Christianity to Bolshevism. There is, if you have a philosophy, a faith, a religion, an ideology, whatever word you want to use, that places the poor and the impoverished and the oppressed and the marginalized and all of these other lower qualities, lesser qualities on a pedestal, and says that they are the blessed, that these are the good people, that you are virtuous because you are poor, because you are marginalized. You are a good person. The homeless man on the street is a good person. He's a better person than the rich man on Wall Street. That's the morality that they have set up. So of course, you can see that there would be direct descendancy from an ideology like that to the one we have today, where basically all of the third world peoples are these angels that we have to take into our countries and let them pursue a better life. And also we have to self-flagellate for the sins, our sins and the sins of our ancestors, which are passed down to us, for this dubious idea that we ruined their lives, or our ancestors ruined their lives when 150 years ago, 200 years ago, our ancestors arrived in their countries and built railroads for them. Colonization. There's just obvious connections to Christianity there, obvious, and that's why it's so corrosive and toxic today. But the Christians don't want to hear this, and they don't really have anything to say about it. They can't, because it is all over their religion. You can't just say, no, actually, I'm a Christian and I believe that, screw all the Haitians, screw all the Africans. My Christian I'm a Christian and I think, close the borders. That's my Christian worldview. No, you do that in spite of Christianity. You can be a Christian and say, close the borders. Haitians go home. Haitians stay away. But you're doing that in spite of your Christianity, not because of it. And if you're acting because of your Christianity, you'd be much more likely to say Haitians come in, or let's go to Haiti and build farms for them that then when we leave they won't tend to, because they just can't and they don't. But yeah, it's a massive problem. It's a problem of mentality. It's a problem of moral capture, mental capture that Christians have a hard time getting over. Look, even Jordan Peterson has that infamous cope where he tries to say that when Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek," that the word meek is actually this. It's a mistranslation, and in the original Hebrew or in the original Greek, meek refers to meek actually is defined as a man who is capable of wielding a sword but doesn't draw it. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. It's a wonderful flowery prose on the part of Jordan Peterson that went viral and everyone loves it because it assuages this cognitive dissonance that they have to deal with. It allows right-wing Christians to be based and strong and chauvinistic and militaristic. That I can be anti-immigration, I can be racist, I can be all these based Chad things while still being a Christian, because even though Christ compelled me to be meek, and that the blessed are the meek and the peacemakers, all that really means is a man who is capable of violence but refuses not to be violent. There is nothing to indicate that is in the original languages of the Bible. Nothing to indicate that. I've never seen Jordan Peterson cite his source on that. There's no other source that claims that. There's no other scholar or linguist that claims this. And if you look at the context, it doesn't make any sense for that word to be having that meaning, because the rest of the context of Jesus's speech is referring to peaceful people, peacemakers. The whole point of what he's saying is to contrast, like I was saying earlier, between the eye for an eye mentality, the dominant Roman aristocracy, and these Roman bastards just going around conquering everyone, just totally blitzing their military dominance everywhere. And here's Jesus saying, no, it's okay. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the meek, the weak, the underclass, the conquered. In the afterlife, in the second life, you'll get your reward. So for him to be saying, no, blessed are the warriors who know when to draw their swords at the right time and control their violent instincts, that's not what he's saying at all. And so that is something that Christians need to deal with when you have a situation like we're in now, and you have so many people saying that, the solution is that we need to return to Christianity, or we need a Catholic, monarchy, or we need a Catholic Christofascism, and blah, 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 all this obsession with Christ and Christianity and Christian revivalism. Sorry, you have massive internal contradictions and problems in your ideology that you're trying to make into a political ideology as well. And you have very little to say on it. They spend more time making memes about pagans than they do addressing this issue. And they can't address it in any other way except cope. You can't address this issue without denying the words of your leader, Christ, or claiming that he said something that he really didn't. It's all cope.